I'm going to call to order the City Council regular meeting for Tuesday, March 19th, 2019. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
I will. Mayor Christine Malkow.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Hornish.
Present.
Councilmember Jason Ritchie. Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pam Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
Present.
Okay, Madam City Clerk, we do have a quorum. Deputy Mayor Moran, would you say the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, to entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, I have one item that I would like to add. I would like to add an additional proclamation for World Down Syndrome Day, which is on March 21st, 2019.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of adding the proclamation for World Down Syndrome Day, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 6-0, that will be added, and we'll just tuck that under the first proclamation that we have. Okay, so all those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, I think. Okay, we have approved the amended agenda. Next, we will have public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council, 3-minute limit per person, or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. If you would like to show a video or PowerPoint, it must be submitted or emailed by 5 p.m. end of business day to the city clerk, Melanie Anderson, at manderson@sammamish.us. Please be aware council meetings are videotaped and available to the public. I do want to note that we do have a public hearing this evening, so if your comments are specific to the hearing and you make them during public comment, they will not become a part of the record for the hearing. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear. First, I have Roisin O'Farrell.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Roisin O'Farrell. I live at 24114 Southeast 22nd Street in Sammamish. I was raised to be the solution to my own problems and to learn how to figure it out on my own. That talking about yourself too much is self-indulgent and only done by those for self-interest. I realize now my parents passed on these lessons to me and my brothers and sisters to cultivate strong character and inner strength. And I'm deeply grateful to them both. They are my greatest heroes. 13 years ago, I began working at home full-time after the birth of my daughter, Niamh. And then I started to realize that all was not as it should be with our eldest child. Fast forward 3 years later, Cian was diagnosed with high-functioning autism at the University of Washington. This is when I realized that I couldn't keep this one to myself. I would have to step out of my comfort zone and ask for help. I've come to learn that asking for help is a strength. I'm often not a good advocate for myself, but I'm a relentless one for the people who depend on me. And so this is why I'm before you again to thank the City Council for proclaiming April 2nd World Autism Awareness Day in Sammamish for the 3rd year. We will light up the entrance of City Hall blue to join countless other landmarks around the world doing the same thing on that night, like the Sydney Opera House, the Empire State Building, the Pyramids, and the White House. So what is autism? Autism is a developmental condition characterized by challenges with social interaction, communication, and repetitive behavior. According to the CDC, 1 in 59 children in the US are diagnosed with autism. Compared to when my son was diagnosed 10 years ago, the statistic was 1 in 110. But I'm not here just to talk about lighting up buildings blue. I'm here again to raise your consciousness to our children and young adults with special needs of all diagnoses. I want you to remember us when you're discussing housing strategy, public transit, employment, access to services, and public safety. My son will attend Bellevue College this fall and will be part of their OLS program, God willing, in the Overlake area. But how grateful are we that the 269 bus route will take him all the way there. This is cause for optimism, And as a family, we are optimistic that as Cian grows, so will our city, and he will find employment here in Sammamish after graduation from college. I want to thank you all at the dais today for the proclamation, for listening, and I want to ask you to remember special needs community in Sammamish in all aspects of the city discourse. They deserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have James Jordan.
Good evening, James Jordan, 634 222nd Place Southeast, right here in downtown Sammamish. I'm not going to be addressing the substance of the unconstitutionality of the Balmoral condemnation. I'm going to be talking simply about procedural due process, which should apply to all hearings, whether they be before the City Council or before any commission or board of the city. Specifically, when there are multiple requests for public information outstanding and not yet fulfilled, I believe it should be incumbent upon the agency to not proceed with any hearings that the agency is having before a commission or a board of the city without public records requests being fully complied with. Otherwise, the public does not know what's behind the agency decisions, does not have an opportunity to address to the parks, to a board or a commission, information that may be germane to that particular board of commission. Similarly, when an agency of the city of Sammamish makes a presentation to a board and the city council has designated through the Administrative Procedures Act some powers to that board to make a decision to then make a recommendation to the city, if the agency makes a presentation to the board and the board then votes and makes a recommendation to the city, and then the agency makes changes to the underlying facts that they presented to the board, the city should, in my humble opinion, take that into consideration and then decide whether, in fact, a hearing on the issue should go forward prior to the citizens having full access to the public record and having the board underlying the city's commission having full access to a full record. This is a procedural due process issue, which is a constitutional issue under the United States Constitution and under the Washington State Constitution and under the Administrative Procedures Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have Susan Carollo.
Hi, I'm Susan Carollo, a resident of 2802 233rd Place, Northeast. And today we're going to hear a proclamation for World Autism Day, so I want to ask, what if we saw autism as neurodiversity? That is a unique way of thinking that's different, not less. Then we could fold it into our proclamation from last month, declaring our commitment to being welcoming, inclusive, and caring communities for all. For my family, that means if you see us out and about with our 8-year-old with a visual impairment and autism, smile. And if you see us out and about and there's something noisy or unusual going on, smile more. Invite us to your play dates and birthday parties. Ask what would make it fun. If you have a class, a camp, a PTSA event, or a Sunday school, invite people with disabilities and ask how to make that successful. Use buddies and volunteers to help out. Tap into some of the abundant resources on the subject. Make sure adults with disabilities have access to transportation and housing in our community. And finally, please become aware of the research regarding education for students with disabilities and stand by us when we ask for our kids to learn alongside your kids in a regular classroom with the supports and services they need to make that successful. People with autism are working very hard to exist in an environment that often seems illogical or hostile to the senses. Meet them halfway and modify the environment to make it more comfortable. Provide plenty of detail about what's going to happen first, next, and last. Be curious and get to know your neighbor with autism, just like you would your neighbor from another country. We might just be able to reach that goal of being welcoming, inclusive, and caring communities for all. For more information, you can check out autisticadvocacy.org, www.johnnyandfriends.org, or inclusiveschooling.com.
Thank you. Next, I have Mary Wichter.
Hello, my name is Mary Wichter. I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish, and I don't have a clicker up here. I can say next slide if you'd like. I also emailed you a PowerPoint and an associated MS Word doc. It's research I did from city documents on the city websites. I understand the Zaku Basin Plan might not be coming to you April 1st. It was fooling. It might be April 16th, but it's upcoming with stormwater. If you can't find it, I'll say beep or next slide. So my comment tonight is for the first basin plans. King County had done one from 1994, which was adopted, and the first one the city did was the Inglewood Basin Plan, and the Zaku Basin Plan will come to you next month. Next slide, please. The East Lake Sammamish Basin Plan and Non-Point Action Plan is adopted in Sammamish City Code. It incorporates the stuff on the right there flowing west to Lake Sammamish. And in 2005, the first Inglewood Basin Plan was done by consultant and Tranco, just a 52-page draft. Next slide, please. Next slide. There were 3 capital improvement projects that were identified. They're separate. There's also 2 consultants, Parametric and Windward, who I believe the city still uses. Next slide, please. And the whole basin plan costs about $400,000, just to give you a viewpoint. So the first CIP that was identified was to reduce flooding. There was a local resident having problems. Road drainage was modified on 217th, adding curbs, catch basins, and a tight line. It improved the road drainage and had less impacts on homeowners. Next slide. The second CIP reduced erosion and minimized tree damages. Basically, on 228, they modified the discharge to prevent downstream erosion and to prevent slope failures. And they reduced the damage to the trees through the erosion by doing this, and they also constructed a tight line. Next slide, please. CIP3 was to minimize flood. They replaced culverts that had been damaged to minimize potential road flooding for better conveyance and less impacts to homeowners, and city maintenance did this. And of highest importance, this area is private roads for the work done, and it was done for a single private family home driveway. Next slide, please. A little bit more detail on that. I gave you a handout that's sort of an excerpt from the things I emailed you. There were 3 damaged culverts. This was in about 2010, 2011 from the Inglewood Basin. The culverts were replaced. The driveway was restored to its private gravel thing. And the size of the culverts was actually okay. They were just replaced with similar ones, so you can see the black plastic ones instead of the metal ones on top. And it was to minimize the risk of flooding in a private area. Next slide, please. So again, the private road there with the gravel shoulders, with the private driveway, is where the CIP was done. It was fully covered by city. And I've already heard back that, oh, there's public roads too. But if you look at my Word document, you'll find there's a page that shows you the elevations for CIP3. It's very flat there. There are quite a number of houses looking down the road that way, and there's at least 2 more houses. There was also a short plat done in 2000 for a new house. So I just wanted to let you know about basin plans, what they're important for, and some of the CIPs that have been considered, supported, and funded in the past. If anyone wants to meet with me or talk with me, I'm available. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council this evening? Okay, Mr. Eastman.
I'll make it quick tonight. James Eastman, 36360 East Lake Sammamish Parkway. I think we made the right decision in adding the studying session for the development regulations. I just want to add one more thing. Unintended consequences. I was thinking of the whole rounding up, adding a townhome or a duplex debacle, you know, one house at 1.6 million or 2 townhouses at 700,000. And plus, you know, people may just choose the density of the townhomes or duplexes and put them in. But when you do that, if you have 5 nice custom homes and then you add 2 townhomes, do you really want 2 townhomes in your neighborhood with both garage doors facing the street with both doors with your other 5 or 6 homes? No, you'd probably prefer one custom home that actually looks like a custom home, but it's actually 2 townhomes with a driveway on the backside, but it would have to be a joint driveway. Well, the development regulations say that each lot has to have 30 foot of road frontage. So you really can't do that because then only one of the sides of the townhome would have the road frontage. The other one would be tucked in, and the second one wouldn't have 30 feet of road frontage. So I would implore you guys, when you guys do your study session, to look at townhomes or duplexes and maybe say if it's a townhome or a duplex, between the two of them, they have to have 50 feet of road frontage or 60 feet, but it allow that second one to be tucked in behind. The exterior, if you look at it from the street, maybe it could be like a corner lot where it looks just like a house, and then on the backside, you know, you have the garages that align, and then the entrance to the other part of the townhome, so it can kind of fit in better. But I think that's why that study session is necessary, and I hope you guys, I would have sent some pictures, but I didn't know it was working. But I think it looks much better in a neighborhood with the townhomes where they're clever with the design, and they build character into them and actually make them look like a custom house by having the street side with just a front door and windows, and then the back side garages, and then the far side or on the back side another entrance. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council this evening? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of the consent calendar, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, the consent calendar is approved. Next, we will move to the first of our two proclamations. The first proclamation is World Autism Awareness Day, which is Tuesday, April 2nd, 2019. Roisin, if you want to come up to the podium here.
Thank you, Mayor. Proclamation World Autism Awareness Day, April 2nd, 2019. Whereas autism is a pervasive developmental disorder affecting the social, communications, and behavioral skills of those affected by it. And whereas as more health professionals become proficient in diagnosing autism, more children are being diagnosed on the autism spectrum, resulting in rates as high as 1 in 68 children nationally. It's actually 1 in 59 now. Whereas while there is no cure for autism, it is well documented that if individuals with autism receive early interventions, environmental accommodations, and supports throughout their lives, they lead significantly improved lives. And whereas individuals with autism often require a lifetime of specialized and community support services to ensure their health and safety and to support families' resilience as they manage the psychological and financial challenges autism can present. Whereas we recognize the challenges that people with autism face, we also recognize the unique strengths and perspectives they bring to our lives and welcome their full contribution and participation in our schools, workplaces, and public facilities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Mayor Christy Malchow, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim April 2nd, 2019 as World Autism Awareness Day in the City of Sammamish, and urge all employees and residents to participate in our municipality's National Autism Awareness Month activities in order to become better educated about autism and create a better community for individuals with autism. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You need a motion for that? Do you need?
Not for a proclamation. Okay, so we have our second proclamation, which is for World Down Syndrome Day, which is this Thursday, March 21st, 2019. I'll go ahead and read that. It says, whereas approximately 1 in every 800 children are born with Down syndrome, representing approximately 5,000 births per year in the United States. Whereas Down syndrome is a naturally occurring chromosomal arrangement that has always been part of the human condition, exists in all regions across the globe, and commonly results in variable effects on learning styles, physical characteristics, or health, whereas people with Down syndrome possess a wide range of abilities and are active participants in educational, occupational, social, and recreational circles of the community, whereas recognizing the inherent dignity, worth, and valuable contributions of persons with intellectual disabilities as promoters of the well-being and diversity of our communities, and the importance of their individual autonomy and independence, including the freedom to make their own choices. Whereas March 21st, 2019 marks the 14th anniversary of World Down Syndrome Day, The date was selected by Down Syndrome International to signify the uniqueness of Down syndrome in the triplication or trisomy of the 21st chromosome and is used synonymously with Down syndrome. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor Christy Malchow, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, do hereby proclaim March 21st, 2019 as World Down Syndrome Day in the city of Sammamish and encourage all citizens, businesses, public and private agencies, media, religious, and educational institutions to join us in promoting awareness in Down syndrome.
You're here.
Okay. Next, we will move to our public hearing. This is an ordinance authorizing use of condemnation pursuant to Chapter 8.12 RCW as required for the Lower Commons to Big Rock Park Trail. Mr. City Manager, if we can allow staff to present first, and then we'll open the public hearing afterwards.
You may do that, and I will turn that to Ms. Fesser to make that presentation to you.
Yeah. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, as well as members of the public. My name is Angie Fesser. I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation. And this evening, we bring forward to the council information regarding the Lower Commons to Big Rock Park Trail connection to assist you in your decision in the consideration of adopting an ordinance to begin condemnation proceedings. We are actually handing out a hard copy of the ordinance. There are two small additions, revisions to it. They're highlighted in yellow for your review. We apologize for this, but this was a minor oversight that happened during our ransomware attack. So that is the ordinance that's in front of you tonight, it's a hard copy. So for tonight's presentation, we've got about 15 years of material to span. I'll quickly cover a project summary, where we are today. I'll go over some of the background history and cover the original and updated 5 trail route options that have been considered at the request of the council. We're going to go through a series of maps and plan views to help orient you and introduce you to the project and its location, as well as provide more details about where we are currently in the planning process. This map is a zoomed-in view into central Sammamish and the southern part of town center. Shown in green in the east are Sammamish Commons, including City Hall and the Plaza, the library, the Community and Aquatic Center, as well as Lower Commons Park. And to the west, or over to the left, is a newly acquired Beaton Hill Park, Big Rock Park Site A and B, and we are showing Site C as striped, as this parcel is slated to be donated at some point in the future. The yellow area, highlighted here, are commonly owned open space tracts. The purple areas are the city-owned stormwater facilities, and the pink on the map here is the Skyline High School. Additionally, there's a blue line that represents the northern tributary of Ebright Creek, which flows through Sammamish Commons and through Big Rock Park Site A. The city uses adopted planning documents to guide public facilities, and what is important to note is that an east-west connection corridor has been part of the overall vision of 2 important documents recognized as early as 2004, as well as 2018. The 2004 Trails, Bikeways, and Path Plan, which I will call the TBP moving forward, identified a priority trail that would connect 228th and Southeast 8th. At the time, the trail was named the Sammamish Commons Trail because Big Rock Park did not exist at that time. This trail project was identified and adopted starting in 2013 in the park CIP and has remained part of that plan ever since. In the 2018 Pro Plan, the same trail, now connecting Sammamish Commons to Big Rock Park, was again identified and confirmed as a priority project and one of the most important trail connections in the city, especially as we consider how people living in the town center development area will use and move through the central park system. This plan zooms in closer so that you can see the extent of the project area and the preferred conceptual trail layout. Here you can see a portion of the Lower Sammamish Commons Park, Big Rock Park Site A, as well as Beaton Hill Park. The red outlines the proposed project boundary and approximately a 700-foot length trail corridor through 2 open space tracts, each commonly owned by single-family subdivisions.
Lancaster Ridge is to the south, and Balmoral is to the north. The city is asking to purchase a trail easement housed within the commonly owned open space tract, which does not encroach into individual private property. The trail easement allows the general public to use a defined portion of land for recreational purposes, and landowners still own the land. This corridor requires the city to purchase a 20-foot wide trail easement from each subdivision. The intended improvements within the easement are a 5-foot wide, pedestrian-only, soft surface trail that will work with existing grades and meander around existing trees. Lancaster Ridge, the southern half of the easement, has an incorporated homeowners association. The acquisition required approval by a majority of the membership. The city completed acquisition of the trail easement at the direction of the council in 2018, and after working with the residents for about 3 years. Balmoral does not have an incorporated or binding HOA. Therefore, negotiations and agreements need to be made with each of the 9 lot owners. To date, the city does not have consensus for acquisition among all 9 property owners of Balmoral, so it is at a decision point to move forward with condemnation proceedings. Please note, even if these proceedings are started, negotiations are still available, and staff is more than willing to work with providing amenities such as fencing and screening to help alleviate homeowners' concerns. And the city did just that with Lancaster. This is a conceptual plan that views the extent of the proposed project area, Lower Commons Park again here, and Big Rock Site A off to the side. City staff began discussions with the Lancaster HOA and individual property owners in early 2013. The HOA was willing to work with the city from the beginning. However, their support did not come without some concerns about privacy. This graphic was created after locating areas that needed additional screening inside these 2 homes with the homeowners. So we literally met with the homeowners in their homes, viewed through their windows, and asked where they would like additional screening, and these are the areas that we identified and committed to doing. We have heard and appreciate the Balmoral property owners' concerns about a trail near their private property. In this graphic, the thinner black lines in this graphic show the property lines, and the thicker lines represent the boundaries of the open space tracts, with some measurements to show distances from the edge of the easement to the property lines. As you can see, the northern edge of the easement does not encroach into individual lots and generally has a generous setback from homes and yards. In addition, there are some photos taken from the star location on this graphic. The first, looking west, or looking down the trail corridor this direction. The second is toward the house designated A on this map here. And if you will, the third is viewing the house referred to as House B right here. So this photo is looking into this direction. Photo number 3 is looking into this direction here. The red box here indicates where you can see a corner of a structure of the house that we refer to as A. We were unable to take pictures of the houses from the Balmoral open space tract and proposed trail, as the city has respected the request of a homeowner to not access the property since 2015, and we have not been on the site for the past 5 years. I quickly summarize where we are today with the project. Next, we want to show you what's happened over the last 15 years and why this is the preferred trail route. Here we have a consolidated planning efforts and history into a timeline. 2004, the TBP plan with the trail connection identified. 2013, we started considering the 5 route options. We started discussions with both Lancaster and Balmoral, and it was added to the park CIP project list, which has stayed on ever since. 2016, we conducted a wetland study in the Lancaster area and as far into the Balmoral as we could go without stepping onto the property, and we had appraisals done for both easements. 2017, the council authorized staff to begin negotiations with both groups. 2018, the Pro Plan was adopted with this trail connection identified. The Lancaster acquisition was completed. Offer letters were sent to Balmoral, and 2 public hearings were conducted. In 2019, the Parks and Recreation Commission reviewed the trail options with the recommendation, and we are now in our 3rd public hearing. The TBP is an older but important planning document. Just after incorporating, the city recognized that much of the development was built under the jurisdiction of King County and was missing a local vision for connectivity. Between 2002 and 2004, the city developed a TBP plan that included both recreational trails and public right-of-way sidewalks to create an integrated system with a 20-year vision. This map is taken from the TBP plan, and you can see much of what makes up Sammamish Commons today did not exist yet, but the desire to connect 228th and 8th was identified. The proposed trail project is specifically identified as the Sammamish Commons Trail, shown here as the black line. The trail alignment connects Lower Sammamish Commons along our preferred trail route to a future Big Rock Park Site A. This map is from the 2018 Pro Plan and identifies potential future trail connections as the purple dotted lines. It shows 2 trail connections, including one to the south, which we also know is option number 4, but that connects to Big Rock Park B. This isn't necessarily an either-or situation, but 2 trails making 2 different connections. This trail project is supported by the Pro Plan's goals, specifically goal number 2 for parks and open space, to provide a diversified interconnected network of parks, trails, and active recreation facilities, and open spaces that deliver a variety of active and passive recreational opportunities that are easily accessible to the Sammamish community. In addition, the trails and connectivity goal number 5 highlights develop a network of non-motorized recreational trails to expand connectivity between parks, neighborhoods, and public amenities. And so now we're going to review the 5 different route alternatives considered in 2013. We'll cover the pros and cons were considered for each option, and a memo was created in April of that year to solidify the effort. A copy of that memo was circulated to the council in early December. We're going to cover a lot of information in the next 5 slides, but there's a matrix at the end that kind of summarizes all of that. The options considered were an important step to determine a preferred route. However, the city has seen development in other variables over the last 6 years, such as the Big Rock Park A and B have been gifted to the city. Big Rock Park A was designed, built, and opened in 2016. Recent acquisition of Beaton Hill Park in 2018. The construction of the Inglewood neighborhood to the north of that, design and construction of Southeast 4th, as well as the progress of the town center development. So we took another look at the route alternatives from today's perspective, and as part of our consideration for the route options, we identified a common starting point for all 5 options. The beginning location is approximately the center of the Lower Commons Park at the eastern end of the parking lot. A person can park, easily access the existing trail network and restrooms within the park. The starting point also reflects a central location from town center. Likewise, the endpoint for all 5 options is Big Rock Park Site A. The site was recently opened and includes additional parking and a restroom. So let's take a look at the first option. This alignment utilizes the existing asphalt trail through the park, right into here, until reaching the unimproved residential street at 222nd Place Southeast. The unimprovement means that the street does not currently have a sidewalk. The trail continues down private driveway between 2 private properties, turning south through a city storm track. At the end of the track, this route turns through the private open space tract held by Balmoral property owners, crosses Lancaster Way, and ends at Big Rock Park A. At a higher level, we also wanted to show you what type of improvements would be necessary for each option. So the green that you see here is an existing trail. The black are right-of-way improvements, which likely includes a half-street improvement to build the sidewalk. And the red signifies proposed trails to make this happen. The pros of this option include utilizing city-owned storm track for part of it and minimal grade change throughout the course of the trail. The cons is that it directly impacts 2 privately owned properties designated as A and B on here. There's no sidewalk on 222nd, and it requires an easement over Balmoral open space track, again here in the southwest corner. There's the most impact to the stream, and it's not identified in any planning documents that we have. Route option number 2, this trail alignment utilizes existing asphalt trail within Lower Commons again. However, an additional soft surface trail would need to be built within the park to lower southwest corner. The trail would then travel through private property, as noted as property D, before entering the commonly owned open space held by Balmoral, and finally crossing Lancaster Way. Just to note, this option was considered in 2013 because the property owners of D were agreeable to selling an easement over their property, but they have since changed their mind, and this is no longer an option. Again, the pros of this: a low amount of grade change. The uses an existing culvert within the easement for the stream crossing. It's a recreational trail which would not involve any interaction with vehicular traffic. It's identified in the TBP plan as well as the PRO plan, and it's a short, direct route. Cons of this is that the property owner is no longer interested in selling the easement, and it requires an easement over Balmoral open space track C. Route option number 3. This trail alignment is very similar to 2, with the only difference being that the trail travels through the Lancaster open space rather than private property right in this area here. And currently, it's actually the preferred option. The pros of this is that there are no direct impacts to privately owned property, low amount of grade change again. Again, using the existing culvert for crossing the stream. Again, separated from vehicular traffic, it's in the plans, and we already have acquired the Lancaster easement on the south. The cons of this is the easement required through Balmoral open space tracks. Option number 4, again, begins in Lower Commons Park, but headed in the other direction. It does travel on an existing paved trail until about here. It would connect to a new soft surface trail at the lowest part of the point, near the restrooms and the spray park. And this new trail would then travel along the creek and downhill of the YMCA parking lot through private open space held by Lancaster, continuing through a city-owned storm track, turn northwest along unimproved Lancaster Way, and then up to the park. Pros and cons: no direct impacts to privately owned property identified in the PRO plan, and it could be extended to connect Big Rock Park B as well, right here through this road. Cons: there's a severe amount of grade change required through this trail. It would require a plat alteration for the storm track. A second easement would be negotiated with Lancaster. There's no sidewalk on Lancaster Way, and it's a longer route. Route option number 5, and the last one. This route option exists almost entirely on the city's owned right-of-way. From Lower Commons Park, the trail would move up along unimproved 222nd Place southeast, turn along Southeast 4th, head west, and then come back down to 18th towards Big Rock Park A. Both of the black areas illustrated on this graphic have no sidewalks. Since 2013, the right-of-way improvements have been completed along 218th as part of the Inglewood development, and improvements are under construction along 4th as part of town center planning efforts, with the 4th construction being slated for completion by summer of 2020. The pros: no direct impacts to privately owned property, does not require easements, and we don't have to worry about any storm tracks. The cons: there's considerable amount of grade change again, requires half-street improvements on 222nd as well as 218th. And it's a longer route, and you're traveling along the road in arterial traffic. So that concludes the 5 options, and this is actually the summary of those 5 options. It basically evaluates and takes a look at all of these options, but adds in kind of a rough cost estimate talks about the type of property that it goes through, the distance of the proposed trail, the elevation change accumulated over the traveling of the trail, the experience of the user, if there are critical areas involved, and if it meets ADA. As we mentioned earlier, number 2 has been eliminated because the landowners no longer care to sell their easement, and the preferred option is actually number 3, which was recommended by the Parks Commission. And as you note, the costs are high in these because of the right-of-way improvements. The costs of those were rolled in, so that's why those numbers are large. Balmoral does not have an incorporated or binding HOA, as we mentioned earlier, but therefore negotiation agreements need to be made with each of the 9 owners. Based on communications up to and including last Friday, March 15th, the Balmoral property owners have expressed that there are 5 who express support for the trail or the concept of the trail with further site studies, 3 who have stated opposition, and 1 who has not responded directly to the city. To date, the city does not have consensus for acquisition among all 9 property owners, and therefore, to proceed with trail development, council would need to authorize condemnation proceedings. As I mentioned earlier, however, negotiations and discussions are still available during that process, and the city is more than willing to work with the concerns of property owners as we did with Lancaster. So this concludes the presentation, and we're available to answer any questions and then proceed with the opening of the public hearing.
Councilmember Valderrama.
2 questions, Angie. Thank you for that presentation. First one, option 2 that you have out there that you had posted that the landowner is no longer interested in selling to us, and you took the option off. But a similar process could be done if we had decided as a council and do a condemnation there. So
Absolutely.
that was so that option still does exist, actually, should the council have decided to proceed that way.
Right.
Second, you had cited that there were 5 of the members of Balmoral who are supporting this. Do we have written statements from them?
We have letters. Go ahead. Right here.
We do have 2 signed easements and phone conversations. So we don't
All right,
have
2 signed statements?
2 signed easements, the real estate documents.
Okay, so we only have 2 signed though, right?
In hand, that's correct.
Correct. The other 3 have verbally expressed support for the trail, and I think would have intent to sign those if we proceeded.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Following on to what Councilmember Valderrama was saying, Angie, with Route 2, if we were to go that route, let's just take the red
circle off.
Hypothetically, if we were to go down that route, wouldn't we still need to have the same negotiation with Balmoral? I mean, aren't we just adding in?
Correct.
So,
Absolutely.
so
Because we still would need access to the common open space.
we're basically adding in an additional easement,
Correct.
potential condemnation with 2.
On
that
private
we are
property.
not adding in 3. We're kind of going around it in 3, and we're adding it in 2. But we're still dealing with Balmoral in both.
And we actually already do have the easement for Lancaster, which eliminates the need for the private property of option 2, if that makes sense.
Option 2 goes, I'm going to, more north, and option 3 goes more south into
Correct.
Lancaster. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a few questions. For route option 3, which was the recommended option, were right-of-way improvements included in that as well, since you're including them in option 4 for an unimproved section of roadway? Did you include them in that option as well?
Go ahead. Yep.
We included a safe street crossing once the trail ends from the Balmoral open space to cross Lancaster into Big Rock Park Site A.
So I want to understand what right-of-way improvements you're including in route option 4?
4 would include the right-of-way improvements along Lancaster Way. So
Which would be what, a sidewalk or?
correct, sidewalk improvements.
Okay. And then there was something else. Oh, so Angie, you and I had corresponded over email on another option, which is not option 4, and I'm just curious as to why that one was not further explored.
My understanding that option 4 was the stormwater tract.
You've definitely got it going in a different location than where I had suggested. So
So let me see if we can pull up a slide and identify that, because my understanding,
it's similar, but it's not, because mine was coming from basically from the back of the YMCA parking lot.
correct, right.
Which this doesn't appear to be, that doesn't appear to be coming through the YMCA parking lot, is it?
The option that we're showing ties in the trail at the lowest part of our existing trail. So you know
Right,
how
so
you have to
that's
switch.
not at all what I was looking at.
Right, so let me finish. So the new trail starts at the bottom of the switchbacks adjacent to the YMCA. So we have to somehow get from the YMCA parking lot down to the new trail. So what we propose is to use the existing switchbacks. So if you parked in the YMCA parking lot, you would go down the switchbacks on the north side of the Y, and then at the bottom of those switchbacks is where you would tie into the soft surface trail and then work along the toe
Okay,
of that
but there
slope.
probably is another option, which is the one that I had explored,
Correct.
which is coming basically straight down from the YMCA rather than following all the switchbacks, which was actually shorter than.
Right. We'd still have to create switchbacks coming off the back of the Y because that slope is pretty steep coming off the back of the Y.
Not too bad.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I don't see any other questions.
Cool.
Oh. Councilmember Valderrama.
If you were to have to use that option and put in switchbacks, despite not being two, what would be again, I understand you haven't analyzed the cost. Is there a magnitude to compare to these other options? What kind of dollar amounts would be on this option 4.5?
Right. So, I mean, we could come back with that. We do have linear feet costs and estimates of the trail that we're showing there. I would say maybe, what do you think here? Because it's half of that would be maybe $10,000 less.
$10,000 less than option 4?
Right, because a majority of the costs of option 4 are the right-of-way improvements on Lancaster if you chose to put in sidewalk on Lancaster. So the trail itself, whether it comes from the parking lot or ties into the existing trail, I think is kind of minimal in the cost of this option. A bulk of the cost actually is related to the right-of-way improvements.
Which would be optional, correct?
If the city chooses not to put in a sidewalk on Lancaster and prefer that people walk on an improved street to get up to Big Rock Park A, correct?
Councilmember Stewart.
I'd just like to go on record that currently we have an unimproved street that leads to a park now on 8th, and that I do not believe that the city should be moving forward with any trails connecting any parks that don't have a place for pedestrians, strollers, bicycles, tricycles. I just think that that is a public safety issue that we are asking to have happen, and so I just think that just should not even be an option on the table. I can't tell you how many times I have driven very slowly on the wrong side of the road next to a family with a baby stroller, ensuring that they do not get mowed down by someone speeding through Sammamish. So,
Okay, I don't have any more questions unless council does. If that's the case, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Okay, first I have James Jordan. How much time do we get? You get 3 minutes.
James Jordan, 634 222nd Place Southeast. You know, I've been on this issue since 2013 because it directly involves my private property. Not open space, my private property that I own as a tenant in common. I've heard every hearing, I've been to all the presentations of the Parks Boards, I've read every single thing, and I want to thank you guys for reading everything that I've written. And I'm not going to go over what I've written before because I'm assuming you've all read it and you've taken it to heart. You know where I'm coming from on this. The main thing is I could go back and forth over some of these slides. I've looked at them very detailed. There's nothing to back this stuff up. It's just spitballing. Because all of this stuff is not true, because I've walked it, I've measured it, I've done it. All the representations in here are knowingly false. Number 5, we're supposed to build all of these new sidewalks on Southeast 4th. They're already paid for, they're already there. That development right there on 4th and 212th, they're already putting them in there, and you go right into the park. Where do these numbers come from? $2.4 million? That's repaving Southeast 4th again. But I'm going to put all that aside, because you've got my papers, and I'm going to stand on the record. There's nothing that the Parks Department has that can support this. And I'm worried about you guys, because there's one word that I haven't heard yet in 6 years: necessary. The United States Constitution and the Constitution of Washington State hold, by precedent back to when we first became a state, that my private property is to be held sacred. And the only way that a government can take that away from me is if it's necessary. And the fact that the Parks Department admits that there are at least 5 options makes this word a non-entity, a non-issue, because this is not necessary to condemn my property on Route 3. 222nd Place is also going to have a sidewalk. She knows that because somebody is building a development at that corner of 4th and 222nd. So the most you're going to do is put a little bit of gravel there. Then you're on the 4th that has a 6-foot sidewalk with streetlights the entire way. You don't have to cross Southeast 4th. She knows that. All you have to do is walk across the street on 222nd, and you're on 4th all the way down. You don't have to cross the street to get to 218th and walk down the hill. There's a contiguous sidewalk all the way. Is it necessary? If you read the cases that I cited in my December 3rd memorandum to you, this is what I've done for a living for 35 years. Is it legal what you're deciding to do? Is this Route 3 necessary? If there is an option, it is not necessary. Thank you very much, and I really do appreciate everyone's time you've been working on this.
Thank you. Next, I have Kara Hobbs.
Hi, Kara Hobbs, 640 222nd Place Southeast and Sammamish. For the record, I want to request that the letter that I addressed to the City Council dated March 18th, 2019 gets added to the record for today. During the Parks Department Commission regular meeting on March 6, 2019, the Parks Department Commission voted in favor of proposing to the City Council the condemnation of the Balmoral property. However, the information presented and disclosed by the department during the meeting regarding the Balmoral condensation and other options for the walking path were laden with misrepresentations and unsubstantiated claims. There are no source documents referenced, no footnotes in the presentation by the department, and as a result, there is no public record built to support the presentation and the allegations that the department has claimed is contradicted by what is actually in the record. James Jordan has made numerous requests to the department and to the city for such reports and surveys. The department is now requesting to the City Council to adopt the ordinance in the lower commons and the condemnation of the Balmoral property. The department has failed in its fiduciary duty. They have not presented substantiated facts, detailed appraisals, reports, surveys, and unbiased third-party surveys. And I do not feel that the City Council members can move forward in making a decision that impact not only the entire community, but individual landowners as well. Because the department did not present substantiated or correct information on March 6th and to the city today for this condemnation, the proposal for condemnation should not be approved. Just really quickly, I wanted to go over the options. In options 3, there were a bunch of things that were omitted. There's no disclosed recent third-party reports. It was even admitted that they haven't been on the property in 5 years. No land surveys or appraisals presented or used as resources. It directly impacts private property. Hundreds of trees will be removed, interferes with existing streams, changes the topography of the property, interferes with wildlife, impacts the Snoqualmie tribe water rights, substantial cost, and it violates the Constitution. With regard to option 4, there's no disclosed third-party land surveys or appraisals represented and used as resources. I even reached out to Angie from the Parks Department requesting a land survey or report regarding the grading of the land and the appraisal. She admits that no documentation could substantiate her claim, which was for $2.5 million. The same goes through option 5, which actually has absolutely no cost to the city whatsoever. These sidewalks are already in place. Lastly, the department did not provide source documents for any of the representations that they've made. I believe that this is fraud in the inducement. Just looking at the preferred conceptual plan, it's incorrect. There's misrepresentations. The streams are not correct. The pictures are not correct. The side photos that we just saw for the first time is incorrect. You can completely see in all of our homes.
If I can just get you to wrap up.
Okay. So finally, as a council member, I would extremely be cautious with both on legal standing and ethical grounds on approving a proposal after being provided notice that the agenda contains misrepresentations, undocumented claims, and incorrect information. I therefore respectfully request this council members vote against the condemnation of the Balmoral property. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Sid Gupta.
Sid Gupta, 4309 243rd Avenue Southeast. I'm a member of the Parks Commission, but I'm here tonight as an individual, not as a representative of the Commission. Trails are critical links in Sammamish's active transportation network, connecting people to parks, schools, and other key destinations, and creating opportunities for active lifestyles. The provision of non-motorized access to public places and routes is a critical piece of infrastructure for a healthy and livable community. This is text taken directly from the 2018 Pro Plan. In fact, it has an entire chapter of the Pro Plan dedicated to trails needs. That section has a lot of great text about how much our community values trails and about the myriad benefits offered by non-motorized connections, including effects on community health and economic health, where it's mentioned that higher walk score measurements, essentially more destinations connected by walkability, are directly associated with higher home values. As a reminder, Sammamish currently scores 12 out of a possible 100 on walkscore.com. Per the Pro Plan's statistically valid community survey, 43% of respondents listed walking and hiking trails as their top priority for park and recreation services, making it the top overall category in that section. The next closest category was restrooms at parks at 33%. In total, 90% of respondents listed trails as either top or high priority for park services. This particular trail connection linking Lower Commons Park with Big Rock Park Site A is specifically mentioned as part of the Pro Plan's recommended trail network within the Sammamish Commons and Town Center Trail. This has been a long process. This route, both for the trail and condemnation, have been recommended for a reason. I ask you to please trust your staff, trust your commissions, and trust your planning documents. If this connection is not made, personally, I will feel as if the only trail connections we will ever pursue will be those that can be made without any perception of potential impact to any homeowners. I can't imagine that's going to be a very long list, nor is it going to create the sort of robust trail network that I think befits our city. To me, everything I look at and everything about where I think we want to be as a city and as a community going forward says we should be making this trail connection. If we don't, as a resident of Sammamish, I'm going to feel that despite all the text in our planning documents, despite the fact that this particular connection has been highlighted since 2004, and despite the emphasis the community has put on expanding our trail network, we're not going to see any meaningful expansion of pedestrian trails in Sammamish. I'm going to feel that whatever the connection, the answer will always be, just go around. And to me, that would be a disappointment. I truly believe that whatever concerns may exist in the moment, building this trail connection will help make our city that much better to live in by helping us all be more connected. Those are the kinds of projects I think we should be pursuing in Sammamish. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council on this? Yes, please.
James Eastman, 3636 East Lake Sammamish Parkway. If anything, I think our city is not connected, especially with roads. You've heard me millions of times get up here and scream about that. And then with trails, same thing. So I think we kind of lean on the side of not being connected. We need to be more connected. With that said, I'm a little concerned about this because I too have property that on that trails, bikeways, and path plans with trails that go right through my property. And I believe I had a conversation with the city a couple years ago, like, hey, great, I got these trails. Let's go ahead and develop my property and put your plan in place for the TBT. And I believe I was told that that plan is no longer valid. So I would like to ask you guys to ask a question on the TBT plan. I mean, if you read through that in 2003 or 2004, that was an excellent plan. The city put tons of work through it. And I was actually saddened when they told me, or when I thought I heard, I could be wrong, that it was no longer valid. So I'd like to know if that TBT plan that was done in 2004, if it's remained active since it was done, if it was rolled in. It's referenced in our 2008 Parks Plan. It says, based off of historical documents, and it says the Trails, Bikeways, and Paths Plan, and it references it, but I believe in about 2017, I had a conversation with staff, and it no longer was active. And here it is tonight saying, well, it's been on there since 2004. Well, there's trails in my property that have also in that plan, and I was told that, or I thought I was told that that's no longer a valid document. So I just want to know, I don't really have an opinion or a dog in this fight. All I want to know is if this TBT plan that the staff put so much work into in 2004, if that has remained an active document, and if it has, if it was rolled into the 2008 Parks Plan. Because I think it's very important when we go through all this work to come up with these plans that we stand by them, and we don't have it both ways. We don't pick and choose. Because a lot of work went into them, and we need to stick with them to connect our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council during this hearing? Okay, yep.
Hi, I'm Pauline Cantor, 627 208th Avenue Southeast. I did not plan to speak tonight, but since not very many people that are for this trail showed up, I felt like I felt compelled to speak out. I'm speaking as an individual, but as many of you know, I've been a strong proponent for trails and been working particularly on the Emerald Necklace, which is a proposed trail to go around, to circumnavigate the Sammamish Plateau. If you will, the Sammamish Friends organization, which is for the environment and the community in Sammamish and grew out of the Parks Commission, has been proposing connectivity, specifically trail connectivity. And we've kind of dubbed this the Inner Circle Trail. It would be awesome to have a loop trail from the Lower Commons to Big Rock, out through Site B, and east and north, back up to the Lower Commons. We've talked about in the master plan of trails to have a very intense network of trails between parks, between business areas, between schools, and if you ask me, we are in dire need of safe walking areas and connectivity. The city, I understand private ownership, but my understanding is that this proposed route is through homeowners' open space. Is that not true?
Let's keep instead of having a dialogue.
And my understanding is that the city is more than happy to work with the property owners as far as fencing and visual barriers. And so I think that over the years, if you plant stuff, you won't be able to see anything in that direction. But I guarantee you, as soon as you have grandkids, you're going to have a trail, you're going to put a fence through the gate, a gate through the fence, because being close to parks is a positive, big positive. And being surrounded by 3 parks, I think, would be absolutely amazing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, one last call. Anyone else that would like to address the council during this hearing? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And I will turn it over to council. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, could I request that we received a number of emails today, that all of those be included as part of the public record? Thank you.
Ellie's nodding her head. Councilmember Ritchie.
I'd like to ask for a brief executive session to ask a legal question about what we've heard today.
I concur with that.
We can certainly do that. How long do you think it'll take?
The question's going to take about 30 seconds. The answer depends on our counsel.
Okay, how about 15 minutes? Does that sound? I would love 14 minutes for the answer. Okay, excellent. Okay, we'll be back in approximately 15 minutes. didn't even notice. Is our camera guy back there?
You want to wait out before?
Did anybody leave?
He always does.
How much time do we have? How much time do we have before the 15 minutes? Do I have time to go to the
I don't know. I didn't know.
Hey, Chris.
Okay, so we've got like 3 minutes left.
Can I go to
We
the
have- We
bathroom?
have to wait.
Will
for
you
3
wait
minutes.
for me to
Yeah,
come back?
we have to wait the 3 minutes.
Okay, that's
But what if it takes me 3.5? Will you
Pardon?
wait?
Let's do that after.
I know, but I'm just, you know.
Others are.
Go back to my dinner.
Or, oh, we can't.
Now we got just a minute, yeah.
Can we say, because we said it's 15 minutes, if anyone's left, we
Oh.
want to make sure they have an
Oh,
opportunity
right
to
on.
come back, so that's why we gotta wait 15 minutes.
We've never really had that happen.
So,
We usually use all of our time.
and then some. I have a question. That's what I was thinking too. Okay, just wanted to confirm. Yes. Okay. All right. Okie dokie. I can do that for you. And just, if I forget because I'm in the zone, just. Oh.
Excellent.
Wait, what? No. We should definitely add that. I love that. Oh, I think that would be fabulous. But, okay, so oftentimes for
Read it on the screen.
normal agenda stuff, you know, the motion's gonna be obvious. And you know what we're still missing from our agenda bills is the recommended motion.
Yes,
Which,
yes.
if we then read that verbatim, then you already have it. So if we can add that back in, it would be awesome.
And if we start messing with it, it's good to have it in black and white, if you change it. Yeah. See what we're really voting on, yep.
A little bandito.
I like it.
Took your shirt off for that reason. How much time we got still before?
We're down one council member, so we'll wait till she returns and then we'll go.
Agree with the comment about the 2004 program. I was on that for the parks and trails and bikeways.
Yeah.
And we did put in years of time on that to have it just pitched. And then
Yeah.
we'll just probably look at pitch,
Between the two? I'm so I'm with between the two of these, it's saying, hey, we did this, we got yours in, and then we can put one here. Until I'm sitting out there saying, oh, no, 4.5?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, I think we're ready to get rolling here. So the ball is now back in council's court. If there are any other additional questions, now would be a good time to ask them. Councilmember Stewart?
I feel like there were a lot of questions raised and that we need to get more information before we can make a decision. So,
Councilmember Ritchie?
I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with option 3.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll now have discussion. Councilmember Ritchie, do you want to speak to your motion?
I think staff did a good job of presenting a very, very difficult issue. I think that I don't know anybody that takes land use or taking of land, even for an easement, that doesn't take it very seriously. I think there's been a lot of work done to try to get to this point. I think there's been a lot of negotiation. I think it's time to make a decision. And I think what's been presented is the most cost-effective, most direct route that meets our Parks Plan's goals about a connected Sammamish. So I'm in support of option 3.
Councilmember Hornish.
I agree. I'm for the right trails to connect the city. I think it's time to vote. I'd like to call the question.
Okay, the question has been called, so even though...
I still have
Hold
questions.
on. The question has been called, so we can vote to override any additional... It has to be a vote of 5 or greater in order to call the question and end debate. All those in favor of calling the question, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Still up. Okay, so those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 4-3, that motion fails because we do need 5 or greater in order to end debate. Councilmember Hornish, were you done or you still have more?
I'm done.
Done. Okay, waiting for some lights if you guys still want to debate. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, I would like to ask staff, there was some discussion being made, which actually seems logical, on option 5 about Southeast 4th being paid for either by the developers or by the city portions under the town center, as well as 222nd also being there. Should those be taking place in the estimates, what would that do to these cost estimates?
So if I'm understanding your question correctly, the two parcels, or the two sections of the trail, 222nd and on 218th, that are undeveloped at this time, those are what were calculated in the cost estimate to do right-of-way improvements on those segments. We recognize that 4th is already done and paid for, and that the improvements in front of the Inglewood development on the northern half of 218th are also completed. So it's the unimproved sections that we identified in the cost estimate of the 2.4. Monica.
I'd like to add that the right-of-way improvements along 222nd equal about...
Can you get closer to the mic?
Sorry, the right-of-way improvements along 222nd equal about half of the total calculation that the linear feet that we're including in the cost estimate. So that would reduce the cost by about $600,000.
By how many dollars?
$600,000.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
I was actually on the Parks Board back when we worked on the trails, bikeways, and pathways. And one of the things that we worked on was the connections, and that was one of the connections that we looked at. And it did not specifically call for any connections to be going through any specific properties. As a matter of fact, we left them relatively generic for that very reason. Because one of the things that we also put in there was that we did not want to be taking of the private property as a way of connecting and have that be a number one way. And as a matter of fact, we had long discussions about the fact that we feared that condemnation would be used for the takings for trails. And the fact that people would think that that was okay. And the people that were on the committee at that time did not think that was okay, and clearly that has changed over time. But I can tell you that from where I stand, it was not at that point in time. It was not listed as Balmoral. It was not listed as anything. So to state that that has been a connection since 2004 is a complete error, because there was never any direct place that was ever listed. As a matter of fact, it was left very vague for a reason. I will not be voting for this, primarily because the taking of property rights, to me, has got to be a very last move. And there has got to be no other alternative. We have alternatives. We may not like them, We may not like that it may cost a little more. We might not like that it might have to be a little bit further. But we have alternatives. And so for me, I will be voting against this.
I'd like to just make a few comments since there aren't any lights on right now. First, I appreciate that the Parks Department took on this subject matter. However, I think that their recommendation came forward without all of the insight that City Council has when we go back into executive session on this matter. There are some environmental concerns that I have. I appreciate the fact that staff has not had the opportunity to go onto the property because the property owners are unwilling to allow staff, but they did allow council members to go. And the two routes that I looked at, the one that I suggested, all blackberries. No trees, just blackberries. And I walked in there and I got cuts up until where I figured the YMCA property line stopped, and then I drove around to the other side, and it did not appear terribly steep to me. However, the alternative, which what we're looking at right now is option 3, I really feel like there are some severe concerns as far as the environment goes. And I think the costs to get in there and actually build this trail that we haven't had eyes on in 5 years, there's standing water in there. I think there just are some real concerns. And as that is, part of those headwaters to Ebright Creek too, I think we stand up here and say we are, environmentally conscious. Well, we have to take the environment into consideration here, especially when we're talking about the term necessary. Roads are necessary, trails are nice, and to what the deputy mayor was just speaking about in the plan, we use kind of wide swaths when looking at our 2018 pro plan, and it was pretty intentional. In fact, one of the identified trails got moved because it was going through a dedicated open space that I had just finished going through the court systems for myself. And I understand the implications of going through a dedicated open space that belongs to the homeowners. I do understand the community's desire to have a connection here, and I think my position is that condemnation is an absolute last resort and one that you want to exercise for the purposes for a road. I don't think we've investigated all, and I think the deputy mayor said it pretty well. We do have other options, and I think we can look at them and explore them. We've already had Lancaster Ridge that has played ball with us once before. I think we can go back and potentially get that access that looks slightly different than what's in route option 4, but I think it's a pretty easy connection. So I think, obviously, I will not be supporting this, and it's not because I don't think that the trail would be nice, but I think it's in the wrong spot, and we do not have the homeowners' blessing to go in and do this, and I will not, unless they had agreed with us, because I think we heard during public comment, it impacts people. Absolutely, but I'm happy to play ball and impact if they're willing to play ball with us, and they're not, and I don't want to take their property. So, let's see, we've got Councilmember Valderrama again, but you've already spoken, I think. Okay, so everybody has to speak once that has a light on before we can go back to the second person. So, Councilmember Ross.
These property owners purchased their property.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
With the expectation that the backyard would be open space available to them. There is a designated wetland, and there was no expectation that any development would have occurred on it. That's number one expectation. Then we talk about 4 out of 9, maybe 3 out of 9 at least. I think it's more like 4 out of 9 that abut the trail area. That's a majority. That's 100% majority, because the other 5 don't care because they're not on that back section where this trail is going. They don't care. It doesn't affect them in any manner. So it's another issue that I'm concerned about. The environmental sensitivity, and it's in the Ebright Creek on the headwind. It's also an extra cost. It's all marshland basically back there in those trees. It's not going to be $300,000. It's going to be substantially more. And finally, agreeing with Christie, Mayor Malchow, and Deputy Mayor Moran, is we really have to be very careful when we take property for the purpose of trails, especially when there's alternatives. And so I just want to end this search for a condemnation solution and redirect towards a solution that does not require it. And also, it seems incredible to me that one person doesn't want to cooperate. Okay, we'll pass on that option, then we'll go after these four in the HOA because they're lesser property owners is the implication. No, they're not. They're joint owners of that property. That's important to them. It's important to their backyards. And I did walk the area in the backyards of that area, and you can have clear visual of the houses. And it really is a privacy impediment to the property owner. So it is a big, big reduction of privacy at a very small compensation amount, $6,000 plus. So for all those reasons, I'm not going to support condemning by Morrow.
Councilmember Valderrama.
I think that for me, there's a dilemma here in that this is following not just the vision statement, but the direction that the council has been giving past councils and this council to look at these alternatives and discussions. So we do have that we've sent staff down this direction, and that's explicit as well as implicit in what we've done. So there's a bit of dysfunction in this whole process of how we're questioning. However, that said, I do have some real concerns about the taking of any land or the prohibitions on the use, whether condemnations or de facto moratoriums are both impacting on private properties, and we have to be looking at those very seriously. Being an open space, as it's being called here, I have a community open space in front of my house, and I'm sensitive to that because I look at that property as well. And so the impact that that would have, it should be a last resort. Given what's been described here and seeing that numbers of these on option 5 will also be potentially being paid for by developers, does not make it seem to me that this is a last resort that we have to be taking this property of option 3 versus looking at and putting in a bit longer route, albeit it would be twice the route of 0.3. So the Fitbit would go up a bit in the steps taken, but it would not involve the taking of the actual land. So I would be opposed to this and would hope that the council would be as sensitive to other private property impediments as they've vowed here. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, just again, a clarification. So if I recall when you answered the question about option 2, you took option 2 off the table because option 2 would still require an easement through the Balmoral property in addition to property owner D's easement. Is that correct?
Correct. And the property D issue was resolved by getting the Lancaster easement.
Right. Okay.
So it was no longer necessary.
Okay. So it's not that we were considering one property owner's concerns over any others. It just
no.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood that. I guess I still have to come back to. I feel like we need more information, and I guess that I would ask that we not only get some more information from staff, but also that in order to assess the potential environmental impacts, that we would need to allow the right people to go onto that property and to be able to make the assessments of potential privacy issues and environmental impacts and what options we as a city could take to mitigate those. So for me, the real issue here is I feel like these options haven't, this particular option hasn't been completely investigated, in part because we haven't been able to allow the experts. I appreciate that some of council has walked on there, but we are neither traffic engineers nor are we environmental experts. We can certainly identify where we think there are potential issues, but we need the right people and the experts to go in and make that assessment. So I guess can't really answer this now, but my request would be that we be able to get more information about that particular option and what we could really do, but that would in fact require the property owners to allow us to work in partnership to do that. I appreciate that a taking is not something that we want to do or to take lightly. At the same time, we have a city of 64,000 people, and I guess I kind of disagree that trails are just nice. Connectivity is connectivity. Providing pedestrian options means a reduction of vehicles. If, for example, there were a trail there, I would walk to council meetings and I would no longer drive. That means there's a car off the road. And I know that that's something we're sensitive to. So I think that we need to more thoroughly explore this. I would make the request, the very respectful request, that the property owners allow us to try to work in partnership to come up with the best solution for the city as a whole, because connectivity and it's not just twice, it's more than twice the distance, and some of those options mean that you're not on a trail, you're on a sidewalk or a bike lane on a potentially busy road. And as a parent, that's not where I want my kids. And as a
I want to make sure, Councilmember, that we're speaking to the motion on the floor, which is the condemnation for this particular trail.
Well, we're talking about whether or not this is, I'm sorry, are you calling a point of order, or are you just interrupting?
No, I'm just stating that when there is a motion on the floor, we have to speak to the motion.
I'm talking about the motion. I'm talking about whether this trail and this option is necessary or not.
Okay, I hear you asking for us to go into the property owner's property. That is not relative to the motion, so we need to speak to the motion on the floor.
I suppose that I have been silenced once again. Thank you very much, Mayor.
I'm not attempting to silence you. I'm trying to keep us on track, and there's a motion on the floor. We need to speak to the motion on the floor, which is the condemnation right here.
I will say it again. I think we need more information before we make a decision. I think that having connected trails that are optimal for pedestrians that are not on roadways is a critical element to this city and to every citizen in this city. And I think that speaks absolutely directly to whether or not we're considering a condemnation or not. But thank you for your question.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Call the question.
Okay, the question has been called, and I don't have any other lights on. All those in favor of the motion, and I will read that it would be for authorizing use of condemnation as required by RCW 8.12 for the Lower Commons to Big Rock Trail, authorizing payment, therefore, from the city's Parks Capital Improvement Program Fund. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 2 to 5, the motion has failed with Council Members Ross, Hornish, Mayor Melchow, Deputy Mayor, and Councilmember Valderrama dissenting. Okay. Next, we have council reports. I will be as, pardon?
I'd like to make a motion.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Councilmember Ross.
I'd like to make the motion that we direct staff to look at options for this trail connectivity issue that does not involve condemnation. It could only involve cooperation of the property owners for easements.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Ross, did you want to speak to your motion, or that was good?
I said it.
Okay. Councilmember Ritchie.
So I'm supportive of that, but I guess I would just ask our parks team, has that already occurred to get to this point? I mean, were the other options that may be possible, given our geography and our topography and where the parks are, did you approach this this trail connectivity issue with the intention of straightest route A to B, environmental concerns, private property taking? Where was that on the list of concerns? And did you look at any other options that may fall into what Councilmember Ross is suggesting? And if you did, why aren't they on this list? And if you didn't, can you? I mean, or would you? Why wouldn't you?
Okay, those are like 7 questions.
Let's keep going.
Viewing for city manager, just saying.
Not yet.
So, thank you, no. Respectfully, no. So the 5 options were pretty much what it boiled down to be honest with you. When you kind of look at trying to connect from point A to point B, those are pretty much the options that it boiled down to. The only option that does not involve either commonly owned or private property is option 5, right? Because that's all city right away.
Right.
So even if we looked at the option 4 that is over by the YMCA, there's still private property and/or Lancaster open space that we'd have to go back into to break that through. Otherwise, we would, if we had a reasonably short route that was on city property, we wouldn't be here tonight. That'd be pretty simple and straightforward.
So just to clarify, option 5, if I may, option 5 does not require any private taking of lands or any easements or anything like that. It just requires some substantial or otherwise, some sidewalk improvements or complete streets, if you will. We're trying to build out make some safe streets. That's what that takes into consideration.
Absolutely.
Is that the only one of those options that is like that, or are there other? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
At the risk of being shut down again, I would like to respectfully say that as someone who, while I know option 5 doesn't require any takings, it's also not a trail. It's on roadways. And so I would like to make a plea directly, albeit maybe inappropriate, to the property owners to say, could someone from the city staff attempt to come out and work with you to see if there is anything that would be amenable to you guys and assess the property? Because I really do believe, in hearing from our other citizens and those who use our trails, that having trails that can connect us and more direct trails that are shorter distances so that people can walk to parks and between parks is really a critical element and really does help to improve our city. It helps to improve the walkability, and it helps the safety. Even with bike lanes and sidewalks, putting our kids and our strollers and all of our pedestrians on busy streets isn't ideal. So I would like to make that plea. So,
Deputy Mayor Moran.
For those of us who do not do well on trails because we have got physical things that don't allow us to use the trails very well, sidewalks to me are the second feature that I do look for to getting from point A to point B. So I will be looking for those sidewalks from coming around from City Hall to getting down to the park. So I know that that's not because I know it's along a street, but if we're looking for people that do have strollers and don't have the flexibility of being able to use those trails, I'll be the one looking for those sidewalks.
Okay, I don't have any more lights on, so the motion on the floor is to look at options for the trail that does not require condemnation. Oh, we got more lights on.
Cooperation.
Sorry. I want that to go away.
Okay, and they went off. Okay, so all those in favor, say aye, and please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we have directed staff to look at options for the trail that do not require condemnation. Councilmember Ritchie, did you have something?
I have a question for staff about this because, so I appreciate that the folks in Balmoral have issues, and we moved down from that issue. I'm looking at your map on page site photos, the big one with the green kind of triangle on it that shows the property distance. I don't know what page it is. Anyway, with the photos on it, with the site photos. It looks like, potentially, because we did have a successful negotiation for an easement with the folks in Lancaster, is there a way to bring the trail all the way through Lancaster and not have it touch any of the shared open space of Balmoral? Has that been discussed with Lancaster?
Right, so that was an early consideration back when this project first started.
Okay.
And so there are two private property owners in Lancaster that the trail easement would go through their private property. The property to the west does have a paved driveway very close to the property line. And so the trail easement would then go over their driveway.
Okay.
So that kind of put an end to a stop to that.
Cool. Thank you.
Councilmember Hornish.
I want to make clear that in my mind, a private open space is private land. It's not lesser than a private ownership. It is private land. And this is a good example of 9 owners that have a private ownership in that land. So if we're saying to try to do cooperation with no condemnation, I also want to make it clear, I'm not against condemnation for trails in other cases, but in this case. So don't think that you can't condemn land for trails in the future. It's just for this case, I want to look for cooperation.
Okay. I don't have any more lights on. So again, that motion is we're looking for options for this trail that do not require condemnation. So we already voted. We're good. You just had a question. We're not going to vote again.
Well, I was going to say,
All right.
deja vu.
All right, we're going to move on. So, what? No, we're moving on. So under my council report, I'm assuming that you have read it. I do require your feedback to take back to Sound Cities Association and the Public Issue Committee in particular. So we discussed last week the impacts related to I-976, which is a Tim Iman-sponsored initiative. I gave you a brief information and then a link to the PIC packet, which had more detailed information in it. The discussion at the Public Issues Committee last week was relative to impacts to other jurisdictions, so it isn't just strictly related to Sound Transit. They're not the only entity that is affected by this, but it would repeal the authority for transportation and mobility funding. And there are other cities that are impacted by this, including those that are outside of the Sound Transit taxing district. So Sound Cities wanted to find out if all the municipalities under the Public Issues Committee wanted to take a formal position on this initiative. So I need your feedback as to whether or not you would like this council and myself as our representative to go back to the Public Issues Committee with a formal, yes, we want to take a position for Sound Cities, or no, we do not. Councilmember Stewart.
I don't know if we want to take a formal position, but my feedback is we need money for transportation, so I'm not in favor of reducing any funding for transportation projects.
I don't have any more lights on. No one has any other thoughts on this. I need to be able to go back to Sound Cities and tell them whether or not Sound Cities is going to take a formal position. They will not take a position on anything that goes against another jurisdiction. So if one municipality is saying, yes, we want to, and one is saying no, they will just leave it alone. But I need to go back and say, we're willing to take a formal position on this. So, Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. I do not believe we should take a position on this issue right now. I think that if we do take a position, we can take it as a council later on, potentially, but as far as Sound Cities is concerned, I don't think we should put ourselves in that group, mostly because we are not really, we're not a Sound City or Sound Transit affected area yet, right? I know it impacts other people. We may be eventually, hopefully, but I think, at least for my purposes, I don't think we should get involved in something like this right now through Sound Cities.
Okay. Anybody else have any other feedback? Okay.
Oh, I got this push on.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Hornish.
Too late.
I want this to go down in history. I agree with Councilman Ritchie.
It's been noted on the record. Councilmember Valderrama.
I also agree with Councilmember Ritchie in that we should not take a position. However, I will differ in that we are affected by Sound Cities as our property values assessments are showing on those taxes out there and have not been receiving anything to date for that love.
I move for a hug between these guys.
Is there a full moon or something tonight?
It's got to be a 5-2 vote.
Okay. I'm scrolling through my report here. Sorry, I was pecking out notes so I can take them back. I think there's something else that I needed feedback from you on. Oh, so I think it's relative to the King County Parks levy renewal. And hold on, I'm just reading through my own quick notes here. I think I highlighted everywhere I needed. No, there's the feedback that we needed. So SCA would like the council, would like us to bring back whether or not we want to take a position relative to the letter that I have already signed, which is the, yeah, I know, there's irony there, but hey, I'm just doing what I'm told. But that, so anyway, is those 7 considerations, and they're relative to advancing housing affordability. And it's specific to, not completely, but there's an emphasis on that forgotten middle, which is that 60 to 120% of AMI. So most of the programs are centered at 60 and below for affordable housing, and that forgotten middle is our teachers, our firefighters, our whoever that is that basically is making money in that 60 to 120 AMI. And so it's a cooperation basically between Microsoft, who has put in a $500 million investment to address affordable housing, but it requires more than just their money. It requires the cooperation of jurisdictions. I have noted before that this is a toolkit. It is not a one-size-fits-all for every municipality. So for what works in Redmond will not necessarily work here in Sammamish, nor will it work down in Auburn. So many of these items we've actually already done, including the use of public land. So we donated the parcel to which the Habitat for Humanity site is now being constructed on, which is one of these 7 items. So I just need to go back to Sound Cities with us formally weighing in on our desire to join in and have SCA take a formal position on this, because right now it's just the East Side mayors. Councilmember Stewart.
Can you clarify when you say take a position, meaning that we would support these 7 tools in the toolkit or something more specific?
So SCA wants us to formally weigh in on our desire to join Sound Cities in taking a position on that toolkit of those 7 items specifically listed here.
Yeah, I'm in favor of supporting that. I would be in favor of being a little more specific, that while it's a toolkit, that we put some additional parameters, because, for instance, we've done that with our Habitat for Humanity, but that's, what, 10 houses? So I would like to see, people have some percentage or some other parameters around it to encourage, a window of participation there. But yeah, I would definitely be in favor of us taking a position in favor.
Okay, Councilmember Ritchie.
I think we already did take a position when we encouraged our mayor to sign on our behalf on this letter, so I think this is redundant, and I think if you need head nods or a motion or what, I don't know, but I think
just head nods is fine.
I think we're there.
Okay, good, that's easy. Councilmember Harnish.
I would concur, but I would put a heavy emphasis on the third word, we will consider.
Yes.
That does not mean that we want all of these things to necessarily automatically to happen, but they're open for discussion.
Yep. Okay, very good. I think that's all the feedback I needed. Okay, so next we have our city manager who has a report.
Yes. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I have given you a written report this evening. I would request your action on item 1, and then I want to mention a couple of things on item 2 and item 3.
I move that we proceed with item 1 as stated by the city manager.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Overdue.
Seeing none, all those in favor say aye and raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, you have your answer.
Thank you very much. I think that will go a long way helping us, and I think it should also help whoever follows me and kind of looking at the organizational structure and maybe preventing a position there for you. In regards to item 2, I did speak with Ms. Comm today. She has completed her document review, and she has requested me to contact individuals to indicate that she'll be calling and kind of encouraging them to talk with her. So I'll be making those calls here before the week's over. Hopefully she can get those done. I think she thinks, again, if we get that cooperation, get that done, we're talking maybe a 2 to 3 week period, we should get that wrapped up. I will indicate that most of the folks on that list, in fact, I think only one on the list currently works for the city, and we can require them to talk, but everyone else will be up to whether they choose to cooperate or not. So this may not go very far. Everyone may chat about it. I was asked to give an update in regards to town center discussions. I have provided that. It's fairly general in nature because these are the type of things that's very difficult to kind of talk about the ins and outs of the conversation we'll have at this juncture in public meetings. And I've given you a little chart there to kind of look at both where the public usually comes from on public-private partnerships usually, and where the private sector comes from. Needless to say, there are two different agendas usually, putting those together. And in this case, since we do not have any public monies going into this, it makes it a little bit more difficult conversation, and particularly come back and report on at this juncture until we really have something more definitive. What we're trying to do is take those things, really kind of identify the hurdles that they may have, and see how we might be able to address those and kind of what their needs are, and try to get that wrapped up in some type of development agreement, so then you'd get a good look at where we need to go. I will tell you, looking at it, particularly with the limitations that we've already placed on this, I have concerns about how this particular development, if it comes together in its present form, in my mind, probably doesn't serve this city long-term. But it will be a nice development, but I think there's a lot more that can be done there. But again, within the limitations we've already placed, I don't think that can happen. I think that's a discussion that somewhere along the lines we probably need to get together and talk some about. And again, it's really where you want to go with things. Will not be here when this comes together, but having worked in this arena for a long time and looked at these things, you want to be careful not to sell your city short, because it is a long-term proposition that you're dealing with. That concludes my report.
Okay, Councilmember Ritchie.
Mr. City Manager, I wanted to ask a point of clarification on that. So, what do you mean? I mean, what are we selling what have we boxed ourselves into based on your experience and your conversations? If you can't get into it, I understand, but this is kind of what I was hoping to get out of this is, are we at a crossroads? Have we overstepped? What are you talking about?
No, I think we're very early on in that process. I think what you're looking at is really what, in your mind's eye, is the vision that you want. What type of amenities do you want here that's going to serve you long-term? How do you develop the town center you've talked about? And how do you do that within the limitations that we currently have? Primarily, your concurrency model, which really, it's difficult, even what we're talking about today, to fit that in the concurrency model. I'll know more as soon as we get that model done. And at that point, we can talk a little bit more specifically. But again, I'll be surprised if even with the level of development we're talking about today, if that town center will fit into the current concurrency model. But again, we're going to be talking about some solutions there. Hopefully when we get those all modeled, maybe we'll find some room so we can at least get to phase one of that. But I would even think, if it was me, a different towns I've been in, we'd probably be looking at phase one differently even. But again, it's a vision of where you want to go as a community and as a council.
How much are you rooting for that concurrency model to come back after April 30th? Come on. Come on.
Put it this way, I can guarantee it will not be back before April 30th.
We'll make sure of that.
Thank you.
Valderrama.
So 2 points of clarification. The second point first is that you were talking about amenities. I take that to mean that you think there should be more amenities. Is that correct?
Have you ever heard of the Texas two-step?
Yes. That's
Well, you got to know how to slide to the right and slide to the left.
right.
Some of the question. That's what I'm going to do here this evening.
Recognizing we know the Texas two-step, we thank you for that answer. You also had mentioned a development agreement. Development agreement, as I understood, was going to be for phase two. Is that what you were referring to, since they're under a memorandum of understanding for phase one?
Well, even in phase one, there are some issues that we need to talk about that they're interested in, and I think the only way to really address those will probably be to bring forward some type of a development agreement and try to address those hurdles if they wish to do so. But again, that's going to take some negotiation to get there.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
So when you talk about...
I'm still dancing here.
I know, I'm trying to corner you here.
No.
So when you talk about it not fitting in the model, do you talk about it in its entirety, or are you talking about phase one?
Phase one. Again, I don't know for sure. I'm just looking at it. And we're in a process right now of running phase one through the concurrency model, as well as those other projects we've talked about. When I get those back, we'll know for sure. I think we might also want to set down with them and talk about the model and looking at their numbers and just seeing if there's a way that fits. So, I mean, it's tight. You all know that. I mean, this is not new. We knew that that's going to be tight.
She's also been living under a rock in a cave. Okay, I don't have any more questions. Is that the conclusion of your report?
That is.
Okay. So our next item.
I have a report.
Okay, yes, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I submitted my report late, so the written report will come out next week. I will send you guys an email, but if you look in my last report, I just want to remind folks that the Vision 2050 Supplemental Environmental Impact Statement is out. You can comment on it directly as a citizen, or you can get me. I got no feedback from anyone on the council to take to my next GMPC meeting, and I'd love to get some feedback from you. I think at this point it's fine if it's individual feedback. If it's a real sort of, conflict, I'll make sure to find a way for us to iron that out if I get conflicting feedback. But I think this is an important document to review. For us, it will have impacts on us going forward. So I would ask that you really take a look at that. I think you're going to be discussing it at PIC as well at some point.
And we did a little bit. There's a link to the draft supplemental EIS in my current report.
Yeah, and I sent that out last week. So please do take a look at that. I want to give a little shout out because our upcoming RIA 8 meeting, Sammamish is going to give a presentation on our success story of Zacchaeus Creek Fish Passage and Stream Restoration Project. So yay. And then last but not least, I just want to thank the community, and I want to thank Councilmember Ross for Friday night or Friday afternoon, the Sammamish Mosque. So the Sammamish Mosque reached out asking for support after the tragic events in New Zealand. Some of their members were afraid to show up for Friday prayers. I didn't really take a count. Some estimates were over 100, some were over 200 community members who showed up and lined the sidewalk and basically created a human shield so that our neighbors and our friends could go and safely pray. It was both filled with hope because so many people showed up, but it was sad that we had to be there because no one should feel unsafe going to pray. But the folks at the Sammamish Mosque were so welcoming and open. It was, it was a sunny afternoon, and I think we all took it. And so we're going to make it a happy event. But I just want to thank the community for coming out at the last minute and dropping everything and showing up on a Friday afternoon. I also want to let folks know that the Sammamish Mosque has invited the community in this Friday for an event at 5:30. So if you go out to the Sammamish Mosque, you can find out more information. But they're really opening up and asking, to just kind of create those connections. And I met some new people and made some new friends, and I think everyone there did. So. We up here often talk about all the problems of the city, and sometimes I think we need to take a moment and talk about all the good things that happen in our city. So it was great.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, for my council report, we met yesterday with the Citizens for Sammamish. One of the major topics was the EIS, encouraging citizens to go online. Following through with that, they had a presentation on the Puget Sound Regional Council and the impact of the population to coming here to 2050. It's a potential impact to Sammamish, and the housing impact and housing strategies that are now being discussed. We had some planning commission members there. Last week, I understand that I sounded like Charlie Brown calling in. I was at the National League of Cities, and at the National League of Cities, the big topics were infrastructure and the housing crisis across the country. That was at the federal level. The states and the cities were all discussing it. Some cities, it's interesting, we think of our crisis here, but Washington, D.C., where I grew up outside of it in Bethesda, Maryland, Washington, D.C., has just ordered 25,000 affordable houses this year to go up. That just to start to address the issue. And we know here we need 140,000, but the crisis is severe, recognized across the nation, and everyone's looking to see how can all the parties do their part. Thank you.
It's Charlie Brown's teacher, by the way, not Charlie Brown.
And parents.
Right.
All the adults.
Okay. So I don't have any more lights on. Are there any other council reports? Okay. All right. So next we have an executive session. This is to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101G. How long are we anticipating? It's got like an hour and a half there to adjournment. Is it? 1 hour. 1 hour. Okay. And if we need to extend, we will.
Last time you
Back to order here. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to move that we begin contract negotiations with city manager candidate Rick Rudimenkin, please.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we will start contract negotiations.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Third.
Aye.